Hey everyone, and welcome back to Gacha Interact. In today's video, we're going to be looking at the last month's gacha revenue. It is that time of the month. So here we are on May 1st. Let's look at the month of April, talking about the big four gachas that we mainly will be looking at. Honkai Star Rail, Wuthering Waves, Genshin Impact, and Zenless Zone Zero for the most part. So right here at the very top, you can already see that Honkai Star Rail is blowing it out of the water for the month of April, and a lot of us can probably know the initial reason, and that initial reason will probably be Castress. And that whole talk, if y'all remember in the past couple of weeks, past several weeks actually, the biggest talk of kind of Star Rail was the global passive with Castress. That power creep that's been going on in Star Rail just kind of in general anyways, but that global passive just being a big talk of the town because of future content as well. If Castress is going to have this, then that means future characters can be very liable to also have other global passives, and we'll see what just that might look like down the road. But I think that's definitely a massive reason that Star Rail is having like killer sales. I mean, we're breaking 100 million. Like that is a lot. I think, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, I think that's only been done a couple times. Genshin Impact's definitely been there in the past. Yeah, I don't think Wuthering Waves or Zenless has ever even gotten anywhere near 100 million. It's just not their ballpark. They don't have as many players in the player base, and you can kind of just see that looking down there in past months as well. They're usually hovering around 20 million, give or take, on a really good sale, usually 40 million. If they can get close to 50, that's amazing for Wuthering Waves and Zenless, just because of the smaller player base is really all I think it comes down to. But Genshin and Star Rail have a massive player base, especially Genshin. So yeah, it makes a lot of sense that Star Rail is at the very top there because of Castress. Starting with April 1st, we were in the middle of Huohuo and Mighty's banner. So Mighty's initial release, Huohuo's rerun, and that lasted for about a week, and then we eventually had the Castress banner, as well as the reruns for Fugue, Acheron, and Jiao Cho, which aside from Castress, I'll be honest, I think those had a lot of sales as well. Fugue is a pretty desirable character, and correct me if I'm wrong, people in the comments, I think this is Fugue's first rerun, and she is a pretty valuable character. Yes, Harmony Trailblazer exists for those break teams, but Fugue has a lot that she's adding on top of what Trailblazer already does for those kinds of teams. She has a lot of personal damage, just all the crazy buffing that she's doing for those teams. She's a very awesome luxury unit for those break teams, so it makes sense that people would be pulling for that if they didn't have it, like myself, but also people that already did have her going for that E1, the E2, because Fugue has some pretty powerful early eidolons. Acheron makes a lot of sense, people going for the E2 if they didn't already have it, and Jiao Cho for the same reason for those Acheron teams. Many people have Acheron already, and they're looking to kind of hang on to those Acheron teams as long as possible before the inevitable power creep. They're getting those Jiao Chos if they don't have him. I was also one of those people. But Vixen, what are some of your thoughts on the Star Rail revenue being over 100 million?
Well, I mean, you basically said everything. There's really not much else to say. I mean, it's just Castress, global passive, and you know, some really good characters. I mean,
I think the timing
this
of
is
the
Jiao
stuff,
Cho
too.
and Fugue's first rerun, so
Yeah. Also, there was an AXA though. What do you think about that?
it was the first day of sales, which was my initial thought process, most likely. And you know, you're gonna have your people that are gonna cry for ratio, but honestly, most of this was just gonna be for an AXA. A lot of people that were the Herda people who pulled the Herda are also pulling an AXA as well, just because they pair extremely well together. At the same time, an AXA can kind of be his own DPS, but it's kind of like making Yae Miko a DPS. It can work pretty well, but at the same time, you know, usually you just want them as, you know, a sub to the main character that's doing the most damage. So that tends to be the reason why. So a lot of people, if they did grab the Herda, were probably waiting and looking for another erudition unit to pair with her. So yeah, an AXA just kind of came around the corner. But I think obviously that makes a lot of sense. You probably had plenty of other top gachas that do that and have done that in the past. And remember, there's obviously the sales are way higher than this in general. This is, I believe, just the Chinese purchases during this month, and I think it's only for like mobile, I think, if I remember correctly as well. So keep that in mind. We're getting this all from r/gacha gaming, so if you guys want to look into deeply a little bit more exactly what the numbers are going to be, that's what that is. Now, this does say combined, so it could be some other combinations of countries, but that's at least what we have here. Now, beyond looking at Star Rail though, and obviously the biggest hitter, obviously 11 Deep Space is behind that, and Pokemon TCG. Surprisingly, Naruto is actually there. But behind that, obviously the gachas we talk about, Wuwa is actually beating Genshin. So if we look at what Wuwa has kind of come out with in its past month. The first phase that we saw, basically the end of March and the halfway through April, was a first phase of 2.2, which included Cantarella and Camellia. So this is Camellia's first rerun, so a lot of people, she's an extremely strong unit that a lot of people wanted if they didn't get her initially. So she's a very strong character, but also the amount of marketing done for Cantarella and the amount of people that pulled purely for her is also insane. So another really, really interesting character that a lot of people pulled for, also made some people sometimes leave the game, but also I think definitely brought up a lot of sales on that front as well. Never mind also a character like Shorekeeper, I believe one of her first reruns. This should be her first rerun, I believe, if I'm not
Something like that,
correct
yeah.
on that.
No, people in the
but
comments can
also
correct us.
yeah, I mean, she's also just kind of like the supportive unit to go after. If you're going to go after a character, I picked her up, and I barely even play the game, just because just really strong unit. So you have an extremely strong support and two really good DPSs coming out in 2.2 for Wuwa. Never mind, now Zani is out. So, you know, there was just really, really strong heavy hitters that came out there. Because at the end of that month as well, technically Zani had the last like 2 days as well, and also the rate up for characters like Phoebe, Shangli Yao, Zheji, Yinlin, and Jian. So they had like their anniversary resonator convene as well. There's a lot going on in Wuwa.
Yeah, there's just a lot there, and I think that would probably definitely, you know, chip into why Wuwa is doing a little bit better right now. It's not like, you know, crazy amount, but I think it's just the anniversary rewards going on. I know a lot of people say for Zani, very, very powerful character. This might be strange, but it's kind of like their version of their Chronicled Wish. Just like, hey, here's all these previous characters, you know. That's really nice. The anniversary happening. I know a lot of people, you know, talk about how good Kuro is as a company to the player base, especially at the beginning of the game. We were all kind of impressed by like how, you know, on top of things they were, taking the feedback, immediately getting the changes in there. So people just are pleased with Kuro. Kuro does a very good job as a company. We've all known that. And to just kind of come out of nowhere and already just kind of rival a top dog like Hoyoverse is just kind of impressive in its own right. So yeah, there's a lot going on there with Zani. I mean, I know that's like the very last day, basically, or last 2 days of April, but still all of those initial sales for Zani and those, you know, reruns on these other characters definitely can be chipped in there, because it's usually most of the sales happen on that first couple of days, so because the people were waiting. But looking at our next gacha,
actually, and keep in mind, you know, Wuwa is not necessarily Kuro's first game either. You know, they've had
that
other
is
games
true.
in the past,
That's
like
very
Punishing
true.
Grey Raven. They've had some pretty strong hitters in the past, but obviously you're not seeing. I think to your point though, even though they've had some pretty good
for people
games
like
in the
me,
past,
I guess
they're still not top 10, top 12. I mean, you still don't see some of their other big hitter names in this top list, at least competing with the gachas in the top 7. You know, with Hoyoverse. So just to further that point, but yeah.
Looking at our next game, though, we do have Genshin Impact. Looking at this one, obviously going into April at the very beginning, we had already had Varessa Shanyun for several days there. So a lot of the initial hype for Varessa had already been paid for, I want to say. It might be safe to say that half of the people that went after Varessa had already gotten her at that point. And
if not more, yeah.
Yeah, just because they were waiting for that, you know. I think most of the sales here, because just for context, Varessa Shanyun started March 26th and lasted until April 15th, which is basically right in the middle of April. So there's still a good majority of, you know, sales that are happening for Varessa that would be found here. Also, Shanyun getting a rerun. Also, just if they wanted to go after the C1, C2 for Shanyun, especially that C2, very, very powerful upgrade for those plunge teams to get that C2 Shanyun. Maybe just as the banner went on, trying to get those constellations on Yansan and Chevreuse just over time as the banner just kind of prolonged. So I definitely can understand that. I still think there's a lot of sales coming from that banner, because that just overall, even aside from Varessa, is just an amazing banner because of those 2 4-stars being there, and Shanyun having really great synergy, not just with Varessa, but an older character like Zhao, which had come out on the Chronicled Wish not that long ago, but also Gaming as a 4-star here, which is like one of the best 4-star DPSs in the game. So Shanyun has just had really good placement here. After that, though, after April 15th and starting on April 16th, that's when we switched over to what it is actually still right now, which is Shilonen Venti. A lot of people, once again, waiting on Shilonen to get her if they just didn't have her from her first run, but also to go after maybe that C2, the very, very, very powerful constellation on Shilonen. And then also just the kind of the leftovers, the people that wanted Venti. Not that they're not important or anything. Leftovers sounds like you just kind of got swept under the bus there. But no, like there are definitely still those people that wanted Venti. Maybe people collecting Archons. So not getting Venti for Venti's sake, but just like, hey, I want to collect all the Archons, which I totally understand. Like, you know, getting characters for collectible kind of a sake. I do that with weapons. So I'm one of those people who pulled Vortex Vanquisher for my Zhongli, even though he doesn't use it, because it's the sake of collecting the weapons for my characters. Don't ask me why. That's just my reason. I can't explain it further than that. So a lot of the sales we're looking at, honestly, is probably a good amount on the Varesa Shanyun, and then also the rerun for Shilonen being most of that.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, you basically said everything that was there again. Yeah, it's just not much else to really say. I mean, Shilonen rerun. If anything, people are grabbing after cons, and it's her first reruns, I think. So, in general, from what we've seen in the past with these next few games, at least let's go back really quick, because we didn't really talk about the future of what we would see possibly in the next month for these games. For instance, going back to Star Rail, we have an accent doxa ratio, so it's probably going to stay the same. And the next character we have is going to be Hyacine, it looks like. So, and I think a lot of people who got Casterus are going to be getting Hyacine, so sales are maybe not going to be as high as what they've been because of Casterus. I still think that Star Rail might drop down maybe a couple, but they won't drop down to like 10 probably, just because Hyacine's actually very, very helpful for a character like Casterus, and a lot of people are pushing for that, so keep that in mind. The other thing though is with the next game, the Wuwa that we talked about, the next banner looks for that. Obviously we have Zani right now, and I can only guess that this goes until basically the end of May, so I'm not sure how much we're going to see more of this. You have characters like Zani and Phoebe who work extremely well together. Obviously, what you're going to see in the banners now is probably what next month is going to look like as well. So the entirety of May is probably going to be very similar to what you see here, just in numbers wise. Genshin, I personally see it going up because the entire month of May is Navia or the ending, I guess, of the current banners, obviously. But at the same time, it is the start and end of the banners for Navia and what's her name? The new character is Escoffier. Now, I think the numbers are going to stay the same, if not barely increase. And the reason I say that is because Navia is a really good character, but I don't think a lot of people are pulling for her. And a character like Escoffier, although she's extremely good in my opinion, I don't think people are going to have the foreknowledge, if you will, to pull her for a character like Skirk in the future. I think most people are going to be focusing on the DPS and worrying about the rerun for her support Escoffier later, in my personal opinion.
I think a lot of people could have also just been saving, because if people are saving, that means they have a less likely of a chance maybe to have to spend because they saved correctly. And if a lot of people, out of the people who want Skirk, they've been doing their research probably and know that Escoffier is there, and have been saving for that, they may not even have to spend, unless they run into this tight situation or just were cutting it close already. Maybe they were banking on winning the 50-50 and didn't. So that'll kind of we'll see where that goes. So I think that's what a lot of it will be, because if people are saving and not spending because they saved, that's not going to, reflect on the sales, because this is only showing when people spent money. And if you save correctly, you don't have to spend as much. So I think you can be correct there. A lot of people focusing on Navia as well, at least for spending, because it'd be like, oh, do I want this as well? Yeah, sure, why not? Because Navia is still, on the topic of that, is still a very, very powerful DPS. She may not be top 5 anymore. She's probably either, honestly, like 5 or 6. This isn't a tier list video, so go check for that elsewhere if you want to actually know where her placement is. But she's definitely still top 10 for sure, because not too long ago she was in the top 5, and she may still be, to be honest. So I think that's going to do very well, because then also in the next month after Navia and Escoffier, it's going to be Kanish Raiden. I think that'll do pretty meh, to be honest. What are your thoughts on specifically Kanish Raiden?
The reason I think it's meh, like you said, I agree with you, is purely because we've literally had this banner already before in 5.0, so it's just a repeat banner, and I think it's just, once again, it's just a save banner. I mean, Raiden's come around so often, so consistently recently, and as much as I love Raiden, and I want everybody to grab her C3 because I love Raiden, I think at the end of the day, it's just put her away
I think
for a
people
little
are,
bit more
yeah, I
time.
think people are just done pulling Raiden. Like, yeah, like you said, you have C3, so there's no reason for you to pull even
Her
if you wanted
C4s 5 and
to.
6 are practically
Yeah,
not
you've already
useless,
kind
just
of
not
capped
that
her
good.
pretty much.
The C4
Yeah.
isn't that fantastic. The C5 increased the level of the skill, which you don't care about. The C3 increased the level of the burst, which is the best part of the kit.
Mm-hmm.
And the C6 is just not. She becomes like a semi-support weird type combo character. It's just
Yeah.
she doesn't go into that DPS role. But yeah, that's at least how I feel with that. And sadly, Kanisha I just don't think has the pull like he used to at the beginning of Natlan. But if we jump over
Perhaps.
to a different game really quickly, Zenless actually jumped up from number 11 up to number 7 with only 21 million sales. It's $21 million worth of sales. I still think that was a pretty good jump. With
Mm-hmm.
what they had, you had a character like Vivian, who came out. Her banner was the 23rd of April till the 14th of May. And then you also had a character like Jane Doe, who Jane Doe was an extremely strong character that a lot of people liked, and she also was during the same time period. Now, at the same time, after this time period of May 14th, that's at least what the banners are now. Right before that, though, at the beginning of May, or the beginning of April, sorry, was Trigger and Ju Yuan. Now, I think there was a pretty good amount of people that went after Trigger, but I wouldn't be surprised if people also pulled for Ju Yuan. That just might be some copium on my end because I love the character, but I think that Trigger was a pretty cool character that some people definitely were going after and was kind of got some of those characters they were looking for in that squad. But I think the biggest one was definitely Vivian. I think Vivian and maybe Jane Doe, depending on how she really has looked in the recent actual meta. Personally, I think she's been a little bit. She's not at her star-studded she used to be. She's still really strong, kind of like Navia, for instance. Same deal. So definitely some pulls. But I think Vivian for what was there is definitely the biggest reason why I think the sales are extremely high this past month, even though it's at
Okay.
the end of the month.
This is maybe where I might disagree with you, but I mean, it's going to happen once in a while. But I think Trigger did a really good job, and who knows, like for you as Ju Yuan, this could just be the bias also settling in. But having Sanbi in the month before, I think Trigger just did really well because everyone that had Sambi or went after Sambi had to be looking at Trigger because Trigger is her best in slot support and off field as it stun. Kind of like Qing Yi for Zhu Yuan. It's like you just kind of have to think about it because it's so good together. And even if you didn't have Sambi, Trigger is probably one of the most universal characters. She can, I mean, as a stunner, you always need a stunner in a team, generally speaking. You know, if you don't have Chingy, then Trigger is a very good value to pull for. She has universal damage increases. If I had to make an analogy, she always reminded me pretty early on of Yelan in Genshin Impact, just because it's a lot of off-field damage that she's doing, but as a stunner, more specific to Zenless, you want that in a team, and if you don't have that on your account, then that's just valuable to have. But especially within her kit, but also in her W engine, she has like a lot of just universal damage buffing. There's a defense shred that's pretty big on her W engine. She's just a very good kit. I don't even have Sambi yet, but I pulled Trigger because I want to get Sambi, but also because of universality. I think that's a word, and I probably butchered the pronunciation, but I use Trigger right now with Ellen Joe, and it's actually doing really, really good. I'm doing like an Ellen Trigger thing, and it works really, really well. All of her banner time is within April, so any sales that she did generate falls wholly 100% within April. It's not like it was cut off halfway and going into a new month. So all of the Trigger sales we're seeing reflected here in April, but also the initial hype of Vivian. I would still agree though with Vivian, what you said about her. A lot of people liked her just for her character. She's pretty flexible as an anomaly unit. She's pretty unique. We didn't have an ether anomaly unit, and she works with some of the best DPSs in the game, like Miyabi. You can use her in a team like that because you want a lot of anomaly that's happening. Yanagi was pretty popular. Bernice is a very popular character. So Vivian being able to work with all of that, and even Jane Doe, who's alongside of her, you know, she has a lot of team placement, so she's just a good character you could go after. Even if you are free to play and don't have other characters, you could do Lucy Piper. It's more like trying to find a reason not to pull Vivian, and that reason would be I'm saving for other characters, or you're saving for other characters if you're the player we're talking about here. So overall for Zenless, this was a good month for them. Very good month for them. Trigger, best in slot support for the second best DPS in the game, Sanbi, and then Vivian just being very, very flexible and versatile.
Yeah, I think it really comes down to how well was Sambi's sales compared to what Trigger was. You know, how much did people see themselves getting a character like her at the end of the day?
Yeah.
Between these two. Whereas, like you're saying, a character like Vivian, I think it's more like the idea with Cantarella. It's just a lot of people hyped her up so much with the marketing that I don't know. It's like my initial thought was just I've seen so many people like talk about her.
Yeah, it might be neck and neck, if anything.
It's probably just because she, triggers a support. Now, at the same time, there's been plenty of people I saw, especially when Trigger first came out, with the splash art. I also saw a ton of feedback for her. I also know that she's a very good stun character, not only just with Sambi, but also I've heard people like her putting her with Yanagi as well. But usually those are like the only two characters right now. So if you didn't really have Yanagi or like Sambi or the second Ambi, Soldier Zero Ambi, then it really kind of became a useless character to pull, at least for at this point in time. But that's getting into, should you pull the character or not type of video. But that's basically everything we've got so far. The gachas are doing actually substantially well. Substantially, there we go. Obviously HSR knocking, the ball out of the park here with over $100 million in sales. And Wuwa, Genshin Impact, and Zenless all similar together, right on top of each other, just neck and neck, still just putting together the placements of where they should be. Genshin's falling a little bit low, but honestly, for what a month they had for a bunch of reruns, I think that's pretty solid from obviously Genshin, doing 20 million in sales is not anything to,
Right. And it could just show that people are saving and trying to just do everything they can to just wait for Escoffier, Skirk. That's going to be, I think, we'll definitely see a spike there.
Please, gacha gods, bring me Varka. All right, well, everything we've got basically saying here with this at least past gacha revenue. If you guys did like the video, please go ahead and like and subscribe. Check out our Discord as well, where we are there pretty much all the time. If you guys want to, just see us a little bit more, or obviously talk with us more there, you can. Go ahead and let us know what you guys thought of this past month's gacha revenue down in the comments. We'd love to know your guys' feedback and thoughts as well. Once again, thank you guys for watching the video, though, and we'll see you guys in the next one.